Yeah, I'm John Dyer, and I'd like to welcome you to the Aspire BoF. I'm just waiting for our two special guests from the Commission, so maybe you could wait 1 or 2 minutes more. In the meantime, I'll just say that there's a farewell celebration for Case Neggers at the conference gala dinner location, and that's at 7 o'clock. So we're planning to try and finish 15 minutes early so you can sprint down there and have a drink with him. Anybody who wants to remain here and talk more about... It's at the same place, yeah. So the intention is that we have 4 presentations. I'll just tell you about the Aspire project. The Aspire project was funded by the GN3 initiative. It's funded by the European Commission, and it's to inform, it's a foresight update. We held a workshop in Berlin about a year ago where there was a long list of topics. We've whittled that down to four topics that you'll hear about tonight. The intention is that the activity leaders or their representatives for the 4 topics, and you'll find out what the topics were as we go through, they'll give a brief overview of the preliminary recommendations. The recommendations in full will be published next month, so it's an ideal opportunity for you to give some feedback. If you think we're talking brilliant things, great. If you think we're talking rubbish, please also say you're talking rubbish, and we may or may not take notice of you, okay? So 4 presentations, each of, we'll say 5 minutes, but they may well be 7.5, 5 minutes. And we'll start with Stefan Winter from Restina, who's been looking after the mobility study. So, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you, John. So with only 5 minutes, I will immediately start without any extra thing around.
You can have an extra 30 seconds. I forgot to say that each of the presenters will come up, say what the recommendations are. At the end, we'll have 15, 20 minutes in which you can have some feedback. Okay, so we'll have all the feedback at the end. Thanks.
Okay, so the topic was integrating mobility into service portfolios. And there was a certain risk that this could be the EduRoam study, and we took careful attention to cover more than that. So we have 3 big topics. One of them is indeed infrastructure, and to start with the most unsurprising and expected result first, we noticed that EduRoam is a good thing, and everybody should implement it wherever they can. So this would ideally be really every campus out there, but if you can reach out beyond campuses and can have some cooperations with third-party providers, and they agree to put EduRoam on their networks, even better. We have identified a couple of, let's call it business models, it's not quite that elaborate, some examples that show how people managed to persuade people outside campuses to implement EduRoam, in the hope that these models can be followed by some of you. The second thing is that users don't really care whether they're on or off campus, they want connectivity at any time. And when they are not on campus, even if you have some cooperations with other Wi-Fi providers, chances are good that there is no EduRoam Wi-Fi for them. So for all the rest of your country or countries, it is beneficial to have a good 3G or LTE cooperation in some way. I write helpful/necessary because in some countries this might not be a pressing thing. In countries like Germany, you get 3G flat rates for very reasonable prices, and you could just say as an NREN, okay, the market delivers something that is pretty okay. We don't necessarily have to intervene here or have our own offering. But in some other countries, it is well possible that you have to do something. We also included some of the cooperations between NRENs and 3G providers to give an idea of how these things can look like. And we, of course, mentioned that GEANT is currently undertaking the feasibility study to look into a more broader agreement beyond national borders. Another thing in infrastructure to say is that, yeah, networks are commodity resources. Maybe not for us. We have our special networks and we invested lots of money in it. But if you take a look at it from a user's perspective, users don't care about their IP addresses. They want to get onto the internet. And whether their IP addresses are NREN blue or commercial red, they really don't care. So This goes to an extent that you might say, okay, it is also a commodity for universities. And earlier today we heard that outsourcing the operation parts of what you have on your campus might become a commodity thing. So that puts the campus admin into a position that he is merely the integrator. He awards contracts to some outsourced companies, and the IP addresses might actually not be that relevant anymore. We also talk a bit about integration of LTE and Wi-Fi on a technical level. There was actually a talk on this conference about how to do that technically. And there is a certain hope that you can even have a seamless handover between the technologies. And as a user, you really don't have to care anymore. Am I on campus? Am I off campus? You just get the connectivity you need. We are also slightly touching a topic of own spectrums for NRENs. There could be something for educational spectrum where NRENs can roll their own thing. But since this hasn't really happened anywhere yet, it is difficult to say if that is an idea that can actually be realized. It also depends a lot on the regulators in the respective countries, whether they could at some point be persuaded to provide educational spectrum for own use of the NRENs. The second big topic we talked about was, well, it's fine if you have a network, but you probably want to do something with it. So how is that going along? What is waiting for us here in the future? And one important point that we think identified is that there is no lock-in into your university infrastructure anymore. Every university that provides a service has a competitor, and that is the open market out there. So if the university has some file storage, commercial operators will have some cloud storage for you. If you have a university email, there will also be commercial email providers like Gmail. And users don't take for granted that your email addresses or whatever service you offer is actually beneficial over the commercial one. And they might start asking questions. Why are you providing me an email address? Please forward it to my Gmail account because that is what I use. Another thing in that same area is online lectures. So if you have a professor talking about Algebra 101, that is a topic that many professors can cover. And students might well ask the question, okay, why would I go to the university and sit in a very uncomfortable chair if there's actually a pretty good professor from, let's say, Harvard or anything else, which talks about the topic. He's known to be very good. And he can explain that much better to me. So I stay at home and I use just some service. So brick and mortar might lose a bit of importance. If we go that way, or if students start using services, if the access to the campus' own resources is difficult to achieve, that pretty much drives them away even more. So if, as a campus admin, you consider your own IP addresses golden or some other color, and you put a VPN access in front of it, and your users can only access resources via VPN. For most resources, that's probably not necessary. You can secure them on the application layer, but having to fire off a VPN client is a major inconvenience for your users. So that might actually drive yourself out of business in a way. Another thing that's probably a bit controversial is that identity management by the university is sort of not so important anymore. If we just talk about authentication, people have electronic identities outside of your campus. They have Facebook accounts, they have Gmail accounts. So the authentication part is just, they have some, and they might not even see why they have to use yours. So federated login is useful, but you should, in your services, consider, what if my users come from Gmail? Can't they just use that account? Is it really something extremely special? Then content needs to be accessible on all sorts of devices. There is a proliferation of screen sizes from very small to very big. So if you just have the web page and you suppose it should work everywhere, people might just have access problems with that. Location-based services is another thing, but I don't think I have a lot of time to talk about that. And the final question in that section was, so is the university ID, the electronic identity you issue, is it still that important? Could it become obsolete? Even if so, the university has a big role in being the attribute provider. They can say, this is a student and he is subscribed to that and that course and he has that and that certification. That is the value in a university account. The actual password and username that the user has there, probably not so much. And the third topic, and I'm almost finished, last slide, is We have also talked a bit about enabling factors or meta issues, basically. And one thing we found out is that the NREN statutes that have grown over time, which very much limit the services to accredited universities in many countries, there is a reason why they exist, of course, but there is not really a black and white. And if NREN statutes are too narrow and don't allow for some flexibility in whom you give service to or how you characterize a service, then maybe they just don't do themselves a favor. They just put themselves aside. So one thing is privately funded universities, private research centers. Are they really black and should be out of the statutes? Another thing is companies participating in a research project. Of course, these are commercial entities. These are employees by evil companies, but still they have some business on campuses. So shouldn't you be able to just accommodate this particular company for a certain time on your campus, and your statutes shouldn't be in the way? One of the big issues where this could become a problem, is we've particularly seen it in the Wi-Fi corporations. So there could be a reciprocity deal. A commercial Wi-Fi operator puts eduroam on his access points. In exchange, you put his Wi-Fi network on your access points. Both sides win. Both sides get a bigger coverage. That would be great, except that you have to carry the commercial traffic from your university elsewhere. So being flexible in that aspect is a good thing. And yeah, there are also a few more things, but I guess I'm out of time right now.
Sure. Thank you, Stefan.
Okay.
Mr. Magician.
Which one is this then, John?
Data. Yeah. Okay, leader of the next study on data is Rosette, who many of you know, I'm sure. Rosette's from Brussels, and she's been heading up the data and content people. Data deluge is going to hit us all one of these days, and this people have been looking at how to manage it. So, data.
Okay.
Uh-oh. It's a problem with data, you know? It's not always what you think it is. It's also the demo effect. No? It's going to happen. Perhaps we could talk about something else for a while. Any questions about the last presentation? You can ask now.
Will these slides be available?
Yes. And I think we're recording the stream.
Yes,
so the stream will be available. Edited highlights. Fixing the PowerPoint will not be part of the recording, I hope. Would you like?
No,
No?
it needs to reboot.
We're just having a quick reboot, you know. Well, when I say quick reboot, this is Windows, I guess. Sorry.
maybe we can go.
Mike? There's this one, but it might do a bit of damage if I did see one, yeah. It's locked. It's locked.
Okay, so the question I wanted to ask, and that Stefan is going to repeat for those thousands at home. For full disclosure, I was part of this panel, and this issue that Stefan raised of the rules and regulations of the NRENs, we see that as a problem for mobility, and I have really two questions. One is, do people agree comment on that, but
It's very country specific.
it is, but if Alex says it's very country specific, true, but still across Europe, with some exceptions, some renegade states like Switzerland, etc., they are different, but roughly speaking, NREN say we cannot carry commercial traffic, so we cannot support one-stop providers.
Well, if I can, I would like to hear from the floor, but before we do, I'll just say that having been involved, well, at least been aware of what's going on in all the 4 panels, I mean, this seems to be a recurrent theme. What you find is that the NRENs were put together, created 25 years ago in some, oh dear, 25 years ago in some cases, and they put together with very specific statutes that limited them, and in that way they gained access to things they might not have been able to get access to. And the consequence of that is they are, well, many NRENs think that they're still unable to connect anything other than universities and research councils. But the world has moved on in the last 25 years. Telco monopolies have been broken down, liberalized, so there are all sorts of possibilities in terms of buying bandwidth. Commodity suppliers have moved into the market. And quite frankly, my view is if NRENs don't seriously address their statutes and regulations, they may well find themselves out of business. Are you clapping to me? Okay. Does anybody from the floor have a similar view, a different view?
I could give an example.
Ingrid.
Different question.
Ah.
What about mobility of users? Because we have two big use cases for the mobility of users. One is when students from one institution attend courses in other institutions, and they are increasingly doing that at a physically environment. That's one. The other one is the international laboratories, where researchers come together. They actually travel, so it's mobility, and then they go back home. And we've had big discussions in the Federation world about the mobility of researchers earlier this week. Is that something you have considered?
Well, we have considered physical mobility of people going elsewhere, and the service mobility as well, people not moving, but they want their services to move with them. It depends a bit on what exactly you're aiming at here. So,
If they're just moving to another campus, then we've got that solved with EduRoam.
If all they want is Wi-Fi, we have it solved with EduRoam. Students tend to want more.
yeah.
Talking spots, lectures. Lectures.
So that is actually something in the enabling factors. So part of the things I couldn't talk about in the last bullets. Yes, we have solved Wi-Fi. That's fine, but it's just one very tiny aspect. So one other example is the credits points, ECTS. It's good that you can port them between universities, but if you do, it is not a pleasure. It is a real administrative hassle. If all this could work electronically and push of a button or something, students would be much more happy, and it would incentivize for mobility.
I owe this man a drink. I owe this man a drink. Ah!
Let's do it now.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Rosette said she'll make a presentation without slides, so sorry about that. The slides will be available later. Okay, so Rosette.
Yeah.
Rosette.
I'm here.
Okay, you can't do full screen.
I am.
Do you want to look at them?
Oh, yeah, okay.
The presentation, just not full screen. Okay, this works, but if you're full screen,
Okay.
it blocks it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. This one and this also goes, but no full screen.
Yeah, if you just go
Yeah. Okay.
slides like that. Sorry, I'm exposing your surprise.
Okay. We have something. the coordinator of the data panel for Aspire, which is, I will not say a huge task for me, but data in general is a very huge topic. And it's more, well, rather difficult where to start and what to say, because there are also so many reports coming about data that we really were a bit annoyed what to do for Aspire. But you see all the members of this panel, they're all coming from a different discipline. Just saying, Jill Davis is a distributed music performance, which is not very common among us, which we are used to more what we call real science. But it was very interesting to have such a person there talking about very different things. Antonella Frese is from the Digital Cultural Heritage, Social Sciences. Jens Jensen spoke for high energy physics. Andrew Lyon was from molecular biology, more specific for the human genome, which already we had a talk this afternoon about this. Roisin McCool from radio astronomy. So, and myself, which are not an expert in NLT. So, and we are just, we talked together about their data, what they are having now, and what they will have in the future. And it's, well, of course, the answer is more and more data, always growing and growing very fast. So, then we looked, then we looked, well, what aspects of the data we would consider for the report. We had a lot more of this. We had really, with the mind map, we had a nice picture of what we could do, what we could talk about, but it was really too much also. The report is limited in size and we cannot do it all. So we took about networking, because we are TERENA, we are in the research networking environment. So we thought what is necessary for networking, so bandwidth requirements, storage, mirrors of the data, preservation, disaster recovery, and also the costs of networking. Middleware, metadata, an authentication, authorization infrastructure for data, data policies, data, how you make data, well, which data is available, and so on, the replication of data, and then the data origin, because we have to trust the data itself. It has to be secure, it has to be. So that were the elements we took in our report. What we then also did was to see which data requirements were common between the several disciplines, what we had in common and what we did not have in common. So from the common parts, we made our recommendations. And we have 7 recommendations which are usable across disciplines, and we have a few within disciplines. So I will read them for you. The first one is about networking. So we think it will be necessary in the future to collaborate much more between the several scientific disciplines themselves and with the national and the international research network providers, in order to provide the adequate network services that are required by all those communities. It will be high demand on bandwidth, reduced cost, and I think most of the requirements could not be provided by commercial providers at an acceptable cost. Maybe they can. So, but we should like to work with NRENs and Dante, TERENA, to see what can be done, and also to have the networks at the right places. Because even now, the costs for networking still vary depending on the place where you are. Then the data itself. Each discipline has its own way of writing the data in a certain format. They are all different. So we should like to have, we recommend to have more standardized data sets in order to profit from the economies of scale, for the creation and use of value-added services, middleware, and so on, so that not every discipline has to restart the same work. Also, the standard sets in the more standardized data sets can be easier for the accessibility of data. When people start to work interdisciplinary, that will also be an advantage. Metadata, there are already a lot of standards for metadata, but the problem is there are many standards for metadata, and it should be nice to have more uniformity in this and to also take into account the multidisciplinarity. Global AAI, everyone shall we agree that we need a common AAI, but this may be, well, too much asked for the moment. A lot of work is already going on with the federations and so on, but we should really come to a common AAI that can be used by all disciplines. Also, the authentication of source data will be very important in normal cases, like when we consider the radio astronomy for the moment, like the LHC. Well, data is coming from a very secure source. It's there, it's coming out of the detector's physical data you can do. But for the human genome, for instance, more data will be generated by hospitals, by doctors, and finally also by individuals. And then there will be a huge requirement to make sure that the data is correct, that it's coming from a source, a trusted source. So we need their mechanisms to do that, and that will be available for anyone. Data, when you have data, data has to be preserved, data has to be curated, has to be done a lot of this. So we want a collaboration among disciplines to have tools, to create tools for a dynamic curation, preservation, selection, and so on. And then we have within disciplines, of course, there can be a difference, but everyone will need clear rules in his discipline to decide which data has to be stored, which data has to be preserved. And the same rules are for making the data available. These are recommendations, draft recommendations. They are not set fixed for the moment, but maybe with input we have here, we can change recommendations or add and so on. So I like very much your comments.
Now we'll see what we can do with this machine now. Yeah?
Next one is a PDF, yeah? That should be fine.
Okay.
As I say, we'll why don't you? We'll have the discussion at the end. If you want to pop off to see Case, that's fine. If you want to stay behind, that's also fine. There will be no retribution. Okay. Yeah, not from me anyway. We're going to do Andrews now? Yeah, okay.
Who's good in Icelandic?
Ingrid, you can read Icelandic, can you?
Where's Save As? Oops. Yeah, show this view.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andres Steyaert. I'd like to tell you more about the cloud services part of the Aspire program. It's a collaborative effort between Brian Boyle, Simon Leinen, Ingrid, who's here in the audience, Janus Mitsas, and myself. And we looked at a central question: how can higher education and research benefit from cloud services? And underlying our more detailed questions we zoom in on in our document, like how can we use the cloud to provide high quality services to our users at a faster pace than we are used to, and how we can let end users choose from a wider variety of cloud services. On the other hand, how can we give IT departments control on all these fluffy clouds surrounding us? Can we use the cloud to have cost reductions, to save costs, and maybe even to have energy savings, reductions in energy use. Of course, there are challenges regarding the cloud, and you probably know them well, regarding security, legal aspects, and privacy. We need to look into these. We need to make sure we have the right conditions of use, and interoperability and standards are hugely important. And we haven't found the secret recipe yet to provide one clear answer to solve all these cloud challenges. However, in our document we describe and propose different routes forward to move forward in solving these. And a key aspect is to get out of these institutional silos, the individual organizations. As we know, the cloud is a worldwide international phenomenon, and to be able to adopt the cloud, we must work together on a TERENA level, on a Dante level, to make sure we can consume from the public cloud together the commodity services that commercial vendors offer us, and to see where we can produce and be a cloud, a community cloud ourselves. Regarding these two routes, consuming and producing, to be able to allow our users to consume from the public cloud, we need to have the right conditions of use. We need to make sure we negotiate with vendors on security, legal aspects, privacy aspects, on pricing, on service levels. And we propose that we work together with vendor management and cloud brokering, define the service types that are important to us, the relevant vendors, and collaborate and negotiate with these vendors together, even procure together. That is the way to deal and to handle these large vendors. And we propose vendor management and cloud brokering on a TERENA level. That is using the public cloud. I'm not going to touch anything. Oh no, we don't want this security stuff, right? That is the public cloud, the commodity stuff. But of course, we are a community of higher education and research, so we have special needs. And there are circumstances where the public cloud vendors cannot supply what we need. And in these cases, it's interesting to see if we can join forces and actually produce these type of services together in a community cloud. But before we get there, we must have clear distinctions and guidelines about when to use the public cloud and when it is relevant to move to a community cloud together. So we need to have more business cases, and we need to make sure we involve stakeholders and sponsors to have a sustainable effort in this community cloud field. The business aspects are becoming more important here. There's a third thing. We always talk about the cloud, but there are thousands of clouds, right? From all types of and kinds of different organizations. And these clouds are way too isolated. Compare it to what we did in the past with our networks. We connected our networks to have one network infrastructure to be able to communicate with each other. We must do the same thing with clouds. We must interconnect clouds into a collaboration infrastructure. And we as NRENs, we are in the right position to do this. We are very good at this middleware stuff. We have federated authentication in place to be able to control identity management, to stay in control of our users and not giving these identities to the cloud providers. And we should work further on these federated authentication parts and make sure we get unified group management in place as well, to to make teams at one place and have these group-related privileges automatically used and updated in all connected cloud services, to be able to control these groups as well and to facilitate this. And a third aspect is the importance of standards and interoperability to make sure these clouds can exchange information. We, in our document, zoom in on two case studies. GRNet, they build and operate an infrastructure as a service cloud. And we look at ServNet. They have a cloud infrastructure, a collaboration infrastructure in place, which they call ServConnect. And they are embarking on a cloud-first strategy. So to summarize what we need to do, work together. we must collaborate to be able to use the cloud. In consuming the public cloud, vendor management. Cloud brokering is key. To see where we can produce community clouds together, we need business cases as a first step, and connecting the clouds, work together on these collaboration infrastructures and on the legal stuff as well. Thank you very much.
Call for help. I'd like to introduce our last speaker. Well, my magician here works with the technology. Christoph Witzig, he's been highly involved in the Future of NREN study. The Future of NREN study is led by Michael Nolan of Ireland, but he can't unfortunately be with us tonight. So Christoph has kindly offered to stand in and give us the summary from the Future of NRENs.
Sorry, you won't be able to do full screen.
Okay, that's no problem.
Yeah, it doesn't do full screen.
I don't. Don't worry. Okay. Good. So you see here the membership of the panel, as John already said. The chair is Michael, who unfortunately cannot be here, and then the other people that are here on the list. It's a fair mix from CERN, HANet, IUUC, Cisco, HIANET, and Switch. The way we approached this problem was that we made 3 questionnaires. And one questionnaire, the first set of questionnaire, went to the NREN managers. The second one to the NREN clients, and then we interviewed a smaller number of individuals. And the plan is to get the input from those 3 groups together into our document, which should outline the future of NRENs. I should mention that the return from those documents, or from those questionnaires, was very uneven. We got a fairly okay response from the NREN managers. But unfortunately, there were very important NRENs that did not have the opportunity to answer. With the NREN clients, we felt in the end that we cannot really draw conclusive conclusions from the return. The reason are mainly twofold. One was, first of all, we did not reach a lot of the users. For instance, half of the NRENs that we asked us to provide links to users preferred that we do not contact the users. There are probably several reasons for that. One may be they want to protect the users from too many questionnaires, but there may also be other reasons, such as they would rather talk to their clients directly, which is understandable. But anyway, in the end, we got some response, but there were clusters, mainly from Spain and Cyprus, and we felt it's not really appropriate based on that input. Combined then with data that HANet had, is to draw big conclusions out of that. So in the final document, you will have a short description on this. But anyway, I think it's in a way deplorable that the team has not managed to get high-quality client feedback. So I will now, as next, say a few words about the NREN manager questionnaires and then draw some conclusions. The first one, we group these questions on what is their strategy, what sort of services they envisage to have in the future. So one conclusion one can draw is that 3/4 of the NRENs that answered the questionnaires said they have a strategy. But very few of them had a strategy that's publicly available or publicly available in English. So there were very few of those. I looked at the ones that gave strategies. I looked at the strategies. And I think it's probably fair to say that those documents that I saw had a fairly wide range. They could be from a few pages with a few bullets up to actually several pages of text. But I think the quality, no, not the quality, but the direction and detailedness, I think varied a lot between those documents. And I think actually If I were to redo the questionnaire today, I would ask another question, namely, how do you monitor the execution of the strategy? Which metrics do you use? Because I think that's probably a very important parameter. Then on asking which services are the strategic services, connectivity, of course, was by far most often mentioned. Actually, everybody mentioned that. And then it was followed by collaborative middleware services. On the question on future services, it was very clear that they all mentioned, or many of them mentioned, cloud as future services, but very few gave specific cloud services that they're targeting. And I would be interested to have data of, say, 5 or 6 years ago, and here, at that time, which one was the future service? I suspect many of them would have said it's grid. So I think maybe, in a way, that's also a reflection of the current hype. On the question which services they're going to decommission, we got very few responses. So maybe that means all the services people have are still in use, but it may also mean that we maybe have a problem turning off services that are no longer used heavily. Then, when we ask questions on funding and governance, I think it's clear that there you get a very wide range of answers. And I think the underlying reason is that I labeled that here, all NRENs are local. It's a quote from American Politics, which basically means that the national environment is really key for the NRENs, what the NREN plan to do, what they can do, and most importantly, what they cannot do. And that has to be taken into account. I think it's also, or the panel felt, connectivity alone in the long run may very well not be sufficient to guarantee the sustainability, and therefore the panel clearly sees a need that NRENs do have a long-term strategy and also execute it and monitor its execution. Finally, at one point, we also made a SWOT analysis, and that I think was, in a way, consistent with the data from the questionnaire, is that NRENs tend to be firmly embedded and trusted in their community and their country. That means not just within the universities, but also within the funding agencies and the government agencies. And I think that's probably one of the most important key advantages that NRENs have today. Of course, it remains to be seen whether that's whether that's still the case in the future. Then there's also a little section on NREN and internet industry. And here, I think, in a nutshell, the conclusion is that industry no longer perceives NRENs as cutting-edge customers. One of the reasons being that the innovation cycle of NRENs is fairly long, whereas, of course, industry and the internet has today a much shorter innovation cycle, such that an NREN tends to lag behind. In the past, the NRENs may have been an ideal partner for field tests and trials, whereas today they may be considered more as a customer with special needs that they may or may not want to fulfill. So coming to future strategies and high-level recommendations, one conclusion is that the national environment should be seen as the key advantage for NRENs. That may very well lead to a situation that in the future, NRENs may actually rather develop differently, and you will have a rather more diverse field of activities among the different NRENs than rather a narrowing. The other thing is also that today it's connectivity and some middleware services that are offered at the European level. It remains to be seen whether there will be more services offered at the European level if you look at the statement of my previous speaker. We think there are certainly areas where they can do that. I mean, one of them would be partnerships with pan-European scientific projects. I think that would be a natural partnership in my view. And of course, economies of scale for services at the European level. However, I think it's also fair to say that, that probably everybody here agrees that herding NRENs is not like herding sheep, it's more like herding cats. So that's very, very difficult. And that brings me to the high-level recommendations. First of all, NRENs should become more cohesive and act in a single voice. Second, they should reconsider funding their funding models for sustainability. Obviously, if you have different sources of income, you're much more stable about changes in funding. I think any commercial companies use that. If you have very few paying customers, you're sort of in a dangerous boat. And that is certainly a process that will be very, very difficult for some NRENs. But I think in the sense of sustainability, that may be a very wise thing to do. Thirdly, I think it's fair to say that the economic climate will probably become rather harsher than mellower in the future. There will probably be a trickling down effect of less funding available for research and education that goes through the educational sector and eventually may very well also arrive at NRENs if it hasn't arrived already. So therefore, NRENs should really consider having a more strategic planning and service delivery and try to optimize their processes in that regard. And finally, and that is also reflected, I think, based on some discussions in the past few days here, is a recommendation that it would be very nice to not just have a compendium on NRENs, on the inside view. It will also be very nice to have a compendium on our customers. So therefore, the recommendation that a TERENA user compendium may very well be needed. And that would be a very useful thing for TERENA to do. Thank you.
Okay, what I'd like to do is invite the panel to all come up and take a stool or hang around on the stage. And if anybody has some questions, if you'd like to come down closer so we can hear you. Are there any first remarks? I can see Dorte Ollison. The question is, how does the cloud panel see the high energy physics, big science, helix nebula cloud impact on the sort of at the outcomes of the study? Okay, maybe you should come over here. Maybe we should all gather around the microphone. You know, a sing-song around the campfire sort of style. No, I should come around the campfire. It's going to work better. We know this technology over here works just about.
Certainly an interesting development, and we are currently discussing this one and a couple of others, what we should write about it. So it's still up for debate within the group, but it's certainly it's interesting. Ingrid, you mentioned it before. Do you want to say something about it?
No, it's more than money, but it's an important.
Yes. Ingrid says it's an important one.
She regards it as one cloud of many. There are many clouds that we have explored within and yes, it will be mentioned in the study when it hits the streets.
Yes.
Do I see any other? Jan, first. I'll try and relay it. If you don't want to shout, you can just.
It's okay for speak up.
Okay.
I just wondered if we in fact let the administrators ruin the research networks. I mean, well, taking out of the last talk, now it seems to be very important that the network actually works, that the administration can have the internet, that the students can have the internet. But isn't this really something the commercial ISPs could do better? I mean, if we're going to experiment with the network, we need something parallel. Or we need to accept that the research network may work or it may not work. And it's, well, it may be a problem that we have examined right now, but we need to do some experiments. Now, if we do that to the network we have today, we get some problems. I guess all of us will. But is this the way it should be? Do we have a meaning as research network if we're going to be up all the time?
Yeah.
Anybody? Okay, I don't mind saying something, but you go ahead.
So yeah, I think this is related to the question, is a research network an NREN, is it a network for research or is it an ISP that enables people to do research on it? And to be honest, I think we have to do both. And so the ISP part is something that could indeed be outsourced, and a commercial provider could do that job for us, or maybe even the university just has a commercial provider for that. But the second role, the innovation part, that is something nobody is going to do for us. So maybe it is indeed a recommendation to step away from the bread and butter commodity services and commodity infrastructure and concentrate on the more interesting innovative parts. Whether or not that works is a good question.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the administration type of use of the network is commodity, and the commodity suppliers do that cheaply and reliably most of the time. That doesn't mean we shouldn't. Sorry. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be involved in maybe brokering and interacting with those on a high level and getting the best possible service and the guarantees and using the community AAI systems and things like that. But there is the high end. You know, if we go back to Castellat's A, B and C class users, you know, the A class users can really be looked after by commodity type services, and the NREN shouldn't be in the business. I don't think the NREN should be in the business of competing head on with those sort of services, unless they add some value. But at the other end of the spectrum, C class users who are after hundreds of gigs end to end with all sorts of guarantees, we still have a role to play in that. For sure. There was, I can see, I've got one down the front and one in the middle, so if you'd like to yell out your question, I can either repeat it or you can scream your lungs out, whichever you like.
I think regarding the last two presentations, I'm not saying it's necessarily the smartest thing to do, but can you imagine competition between the NRENs, and is it okay to have competition between them?
The question is, can you imagine the NRENs competing against one another for the business of the users? No. What we have discussed, what we are discussing, is that NRENs that do something particularly well and have particular expertise could offer that service to other NRENs community users. So, if you like, it will be NRENs providing services in between NRENs, so inter-NREN provision of services. I can imagine that happening. So I feel myself sliding slowly off the front of the stage. So NRENs providing service for one another. I don't regard that as competition. I mean, okay, it is competition. The best in breed would provide the service, if you like. But I can't imagine cut price wars and closing down sales and all things like that. So
call it specialization instead of competition.
Specialization, that sounds good. Christoph.
Well, of course, the question is also competition on what? I can imagine in delivering certain services, it may very well be that different NRENs have different services, and I think in that case it can be a competition of service offered, and why not, if you have your own service and you feel that the other NREN has maybe a better service than what you have, why not adopt that one? That's a form of competition as well, and I think that's actually not a bad competition.
One follow-up, then we go up there, and then we come down to class.
Should NRENs transcend the local focus?
Should NRENs transcend the local focus? We have Dante, Jean, Individually, I don't believe it will be, well, I don't know. I don't believe it will be healthy if an NREN in one country went hunting for users in another country. That's what KPN said.
Telecom operators said exactly the same thing. It's better we give the customers a much better service. No, they shouldn't go shopping around. We know what's best for them. Why is an NREN different? I'm today doing a good job at becoming popular.
Klaas, why don't you just... Sorry. I mean, we do operate in a different way than the commercial sector. Commercial sector have got to make a profit for their shareholders. So it's a legal requirement of directors of public companies. In our community, we try to do the best. So there is some sort of community spirit, and I don't think we've quite got to the daggers drawn competition for customers. You might consider that we might cooperate more strongly together, and there's an example of a possibility of doing that with the proposal that's currently come out through the European Commission, the idea for the CEF, the Connecting Europe facility, which has a portion of it aimed at improving digital infrastructures. Now, maybe the NRENs would like to work together on being involved in that. I mean, that's something that the NRENs need to decide over the next few months or so. So if I can come to you.
Okay, I have a question concerning the mix of ISPs and NRENs, because an ISP normally has to deliver millions of services, and the NREN has to deliver hundreds of services or tens of services. So if you take a cloud model, infrastructure as a service cloud, you will have security in a more or less private cloud or community cloud, and you will lose security if you go to service providers that actually provide millions of services like TV services, like individual voice services, and stuff like that.
I mean, the idea of Surf Connects and the idea of the TERENA pilot is that you can transparently, if you like, allow the users to put the data in the most appropriate place. If it's inconsequential data, but there's a lot of it, you can put it in the public cloud, and the security doesn't matter much. If you've got something that's of proprietary nature or of grave importance to you, you can put it in a cloud that gives you the assurances of privacy and resilience and security, those sort of things. That's what the sort of idea that Surf Connects, I believe, is offering. So, yeah, people have to be more aware about where they put the data, not in terms of geography, but the level of assurance they get from a specific cloud. If you say, I want it in a really, really safe place, it might be in our community. If you just want it cheap and lots of it, it might be in the commercial cloud.
John, if I can add, different clouds for different needs, and there needs to be transparency in what that cloud contains and what the vendor or the provider is doing with it. And joining forces, TERENA and Dante, will help us to achieve this.
Yes, okay, I agree with you. It's a better way of storing mass data in a cheaper cloud, for instance, if these mass data are not
it's about storing in the appropriate place, and the appropriateness of a place depends on the requirements you have for protecting that data, and the price you're willing to pay to protect that data. It's a trade-off. Klaas, did you want to say something else?
Actually, I kind of made my point, but I'm happy to add to it.
Klaas is very happy to add to his point, which was?
So, I mean, I'm not saying that the model that now exists is not sustainable, but I think it would would be good for the NRENs to wonder what it would be like to operate in a competitive environment where a university might decide to buy their service from another NREN just as much as they might consider buying it from Amazon. And I think there is a danger, that's why I used the telecom operator example, there is a danger of complacency and patting each other on the back, oh what a wonderful job.
I take that point, absolutely, and we should not, as NRENs, be complacent, and we should review what we're doing and how our customers regard us all of the time, just as the commercials do. But if you're talking about Amazon, for instance, sure, they have their data centers in only a few places, or Google for that matter, they have their data centers in a few places, but they do have some presence in the other countries, which is not something that the NRENs typically do right now. So if the Australian NREN, for instance, was offering services to Iceland, it's unlikely that they'd have an office here. They could have a virtual office, of course.
Well enough, they will.
Yeah. But then if it pays well enough, somebody's got to pay a lot to make it pay well enough. So, you know, I mean, it's...
Just touching on your
Alex.
point about the need for NRENs not to be complacent.
Yeah.
And linking that with the funding models, I think the best way to ensure that NRENs are not complacent is to change the funding model so that the clients pay for the service.
I've always thought that the best, what Alex is saying is to make sure that the NRENs do not become complacent and do not provide services sufficiently high quality to their users. The users should actually be paying for that service. So if they don't like the service they're getting from their local NREN, they walk with their feet and money and go and buy it somewhere else. And I think that's right. I mean, in the whole model of NRENs, what I see is that probably users should pay for the services directly. If you look at the model of funding of NRENs in Europe, what you'll find is there's a whole spectrum from the NRENs that receive 100% funding from government to NRENs that are 100% funded by users. And the ones that perform, in my view, this is a personal view, the ones that perform the best are the ones in the middle that receive a proportion of the money from users. That's usually the money for the services that they're delivering, so the users pay for what they get. But users find it very difficult to invest in blue sky in the next generation. So if there's some central pot that can help to pay for that blue sky research to push on to the next stage, that's a good method for central funding. That's what I think, but that's my personal view.
We have also seen some of that in our Wi-Fi study, where we saw that some universities also have a Wi-Fi network for commercial guests that come along, and their only solution due to the statutes is that they buy a second line to a commercial operator and route that Wi-Fi network elsewhere, just so that they can give away the service. And from there, it is actually a very tiny step for the university to say, well, that second link we got actually works pretty well, and we could route all of our traffic there, and oh, why exactly do we need the NREN now for our connectivity? So this is really dangerous, I think.
Okay, I've just been told it's 7:05. So if you do want to fly off to go and see Case Neggers and say goodbye, which would be very nice, please go ahead. If you want to stay and talk more, I'm willing to stay to the bitter end, or the happy end, I don't know. Are there any more questions? Any more suggestions for things we haven't done? Okay, well, I'd like to close the meeting and say thank you to all of you for coming along. If you've got any comments, you're quite welcome to post them on a list that we've got, aspire@terena.org. If you're not on that list, just send me an email, dia@terena.org, and I'll put you on the list. If you want to post any questions or suggestions or anything else, please do post it or to the list or to me directly. Thanks very much. Enjoy the reception and enjoy the gala dinner. So thanks very much. Apologies for the technology. The draft texts are in very late stages of development. They're not ready for distribution yet, but expect them in a few weeks. We may ask me if you want something. we don't want to. Okay.